Welcome back, fellas. It is week 16. We are officially into the second round of the fantasy football playoffs. If you guys had a bye week, enjoy your week off. We are back to the grind. And if you guys advanced in your fantasy playoff matchup, congratulations to you. Today, we're going to be breaking down 10 players to add to your fantasy football teams to help push you towards that championship round of the fantasy football playoffs. Not the greatest waiver wire slate this week, but there are some guys, if you guys have some injuries, that you need to plug some holes and get into your starting lineup. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, so going through my top 10 waiver ads, going from 10 to 1. Basically, at this point in the season, I'm not even talking about fab percentages. If you have any fab left, obviously blow it all on a player that you really need. If you're really in need of a wide receiver, blow it on a wide receiver. If you're really in need of a stash for your bench, blow it on a running back, etc. So number 10 on this list is Hunter Henry. Fresh off of the trying to steal Travis Kelce's girl game. He has 2 straight top 5 weeks the past couple games, and the Patriots get the Broncos this week, which are the third best matchup of any team for fantasy tight ends. So definitely a good spot for Hunter Henry to continue his strong stretch of games. So if you're streaming the tight end position, go on and pick up Hunter Henry. Tyler Allgeier is my number 9 ad on the week. In true Arthur Smith, brain-dead asshole coach fashion, he woke up and he chose violence in the fantasy playoffs, which is something that we probably all should have expected when Bijan Robinson went for negative points and Tyler Allgeier had 49% of the team snaps. After 6 straight games of Tyler Allgeier being basically useless, just a handcuff, sub 35% of the snaps, Allgeier spiked to 49% this week, and surprise, surprise, the Falcons lost the game, and Arthur Smith had to answer questions yet again about how he's mismanaging his talent because Pitts, London, Bijan, none of them did anything, and they lost to the team that is currently in possession of the worst record in the NFL, the Carolina Panthers. So if you're wondering why would I pick up Tyler Allgeier, it's because he's still usable as an absolutely desperation flex option, but mainly if Bijan were to go down this week in week 16, I know that Tyler Allgeier would be a top 12 to 15 running back in my rankings in week 17 against the Chicago Bears. So even though we only have 2 weeks left of the actual fantasy football playoffs, you still should be thinking about, hey, what happens if Bijan goes down this week? Because Allgeier would be an absolute league winner, a guy that you throw into your lineup into week 17, just like Rashad Penny was a couple years ago. Number 8 on this list is Trey Sermon, who is widely available, but he'd be a lot higher on this list if we knew the state of the Colts backfield right now, because Trey Sermon being relevant actually requires 2 injuries to keep both players out, because Zach Moss suffered a shoulder injury, which quote unquote he's going to play through, but it didn't look very good. It's possible that he misses this week. And then Jonathan Taylor has missed the last 3 games with a thumb injury. He did have thumb surgery a couple weeks ago. It does sound like he might try and make his return. Regardless, I think Trey Sermon is a decent stash just in case both of these guys are out. But I probably wouldn't add him unless you have just a complete useless option on your bench. There's probably better stashes out there than Trey Sermon, but a decent option nonetheless at number 8. Number 7 is the better of the 2 tight end options that made this list. Tucker Kraft, rostered right now in 14% of leagues. 4 straight games over 95% of the snaps for the Packers. 16 targets over his last 3 games, and over 55 yards in his last 2 games. Tucker Kraft is arriving right now. I loved him as a prospect, and he is having a hell of a stretch, breaking out over the last few games without Luke Musgrave. And honestly, I think you can ride this Tucker Kraft wave if you're streaming this coming week against Carolina. They're a pretty exploitable matchup, a pretty bad defense. So Tucker Kraft, a decent option between him and Hunter Henry. If you guys need to pick up a tight end and throw him right into your lineup, I think both guys are pretty decent guys that are widely available. So Dontayvion Wicks is my number 6 option on the waiver wire this week, and another Green Bay Packer. I'd say this one is totally dependent, again, similar to the Trey Sermon situation, on Christian Watson's injury. So if you wanted to pick up Dontayvion Wicks, stash him at the end of your bench in case Christian Watson is out again, then I think you can actually use this guy as a top 45 wide receiver, because Wicks actually holds both of the Packers' single game highs for receiving yards this year at 91 in week 11 and 97 this past week. He's the only Packers wide receiver that has graded over 75.0 on PFF. He's a top 28 graded wide receiver right now, and he's also the only wide receiver averaging over 2 yards per route run. So he's actually been a pretty decent find for them in the late rounds of the NFL draft. I actually really liked his film coming out of Virginia. He's had 6 and 7 targets the last 2 games, and like I said, if Christian Watson is out again, I think you can play Dontayvion Wicks this week against the Carolina Panthers, so not a bad option for a low-end flex play. I got a couple better options here. Number 5 being Curtis Samuel, who I think is a better option than Wicks this week. 25 targets the last 3 games. He presents a very good matchup advantage this week in case you need to fill in for Jamar Chase or Tyreek Hill if he's out again, or Nico Collins if he's out again. If you're in need of a solid flex, I think Curtis Samuel can be your guy. The Jets' outside corners are pretty strong. We know DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, not the type of guys that we want to exploit in fantasy football, but slot wide receivers specifically like Curtis Samuel have actually performed pretty well going up against Michael Carter there. So on the field, when you're looking at what matchups to exploit, I think Sam Howell and the Washington Commanders game plan will really notice that matchup and really feed Curtis Samuel this week. The last big slot receiver or main primary slot receiver that we saw go up against the New York Jets was Khalil Shakir, who went for over 100 yards, caught a long touchdown as well. So Curtis Samuel, a pretty decent option this week if you need some production. My number 4 ad on the week is Chase Brown, who was actually my number 1 ad last week. He still qualifies as probably the best stash in all of fantasy football right now. In case a Joe Mixon injury happens, maybe we get a week 17 Chase Brown in a starting role. Similar to what I said about Tyler Allgeier, only the difference between these two guys is that Chase Brown at least has a very solid standalone role to make him a top 36 running back in my rankings the next 2 weeks without a Joe Mixon injury. So 11 opportunities in 2 straight games. He looks awesome every time he gets the ball. Feels like it's a minimum 5 to 10 yards every time he touches it. And he's an upside stash for one more week in case we do get Chase Brown in a starting role in week 17. He could absolutely win some people some leagues. Noah Brown is my number 3 ad on the week. Nico Collins was out this past week, as was CJ Stroud. It's definitely a tough matchup this week for Noah Brown and the Texans versus Cleveland. But if they do get through Cleveland, and if you do get into your week 17 matchup and win your fantasy football matchup this week, Noah Brown has the Titans again in week 17. And again, by that point, we should assume that CJ Stroud is going to be back on the field, but it is no guarantee that Nico Collins is back on the field this week and in week 17. So if you're in a deeper league, if you need a decent flex option, I think Noah Brown is the premier guy to go after. Or if you're dealing with injuries at wide receiver, like I said, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase looks like he's going to be out for a couple games. Nico Collins himself, also a good fill-in, a natural fill-in is Noah Brown. So definitely a good option if you need a flex. These next 2 guys are probably the best available waiver wire options on the week. Josh Palmer, my number 2, he caught a bomb touchdown in the blowout loss to the Las Vegas Raiders. His role was actually quite valuable when we last saw him healthy on the field. Of course, that was with Justin Herbert. But even if Keenan Allen is back, we should have another positive game script this week to go up against the Buffalo Bills on Saturday night. So with Josh Palmer, Easton Stick's nothing special at all. But if you lost some players to injury, I do think that Josh Palmer is one of the premier options to go after. He and Noah Brown are pretty highly rostered. But given the fact that there's only 4 teams left in most people's leagues, I would imagine that some teams are not really active on the waiver wire. And if Josh Palmer was dropped prior to his stint on IR, he might be out there in your league. So my number 1 waiver ad on the week is Zamir White, who of course had a big game this past week, saw 20 opportunities and 70% of the snaps in relief of Josh Jacobs. He found the end zone and was a top 12 scoring running back in week 15. Uncertain if Josh Jacobs will be back this week, although Josh Jacobs has been very durable throughout the course of his career. He's a really tough dude. I'm sure he'll try and get himself back for this game. Plus, Josh Jacobs will actually have 11 days to recover because they played on Thursday night this past week. They don't play till Monday night in week 16. So Zamir White, definitely the best ad available on the waiver wire right now. If you have any fab left, I do think that he is worth every last dime that you have, because we saw, like I said, in Josh Jacobs' absence, he was a 70% snap share back, a guy that was getting 20 opportunities, most of the carries, and I do think that this is a pretty half-decent matchup against the Chiefs. Should be a close game. So if you need a running back, Zamir White is probably your guy. We did have some injuries this past week at that position, so it could make some sense for you. So that is the end of the video. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe down below. Also, leave any feedback, leave any questions and any ideas for videos for this week coming up. We're always looking for ideas this time of year. And of course, we want to help you guys win your championship. So if there's something that we didn't do last week that you want to see us do this week, or vice versa, then definitely leave that down below in the comments. And of course, be sure to check out our site, Flock Fantasy, which completely was redesigned aesthetically this past week. Looks a lot better, looks a lot more sharp. The rankings are fully updated. The posts are going fast and furious. We got prospect talk coming very soon. The Dynasty Land boys are putting out their draft guide with a lot of early rookie talk. So if that interests you, definitely check it out. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up to get a free bonus episode of me and Danny every single week. We will be going through our top 5 pass catchers in the 2024 NFL draft. So Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Brock Bowers, those type of guys. We'll be breaking down their film on the site this coming week. So you definitely don't want to miss that. Use the promo code FSC for 30% off. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.